In episode 158 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet with David Knox, the author of Body School. The show notes for this episode can be found at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/158. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. I want to thank you for joining me for this conversation with David Knox. I'm so grateful to have you here as a part of the 40 Fitness podcast. On that note, I want to invite you to join me for something really cool. Our Facebook group is going to celebrate the month of October as Gratitude Month. Each day we'll post something we're grateful about. Come join us in the conversation at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group. David Knox has studied dance to include ballet, jazz, and modern, and martial arts. He holds 2 black belts. So you know he knows how to move properly. His book, Body School, is a wonderful resource for movement and form. We had some sound quality issues that I hope my sound guy can correct, but just in case, I apologize for anything. And again, with no further ado, here's David Knox. So David, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's nice to be here.
I really enjoyed this book, Body School. And the funny thing is, it says on the cover that it's the ultimate guide to the human body. And to be honest with you, it is. I can see this as a book that I'm going to pull off the bookshelf more than once to reread because it's extremely comprehensive. But you do such a good job of explaining things in the book that's what I really enjoyed about it is that, sometimes if I'm struggling to communicate to one of my clients, I feel like I can pull this book down and say, okay, how did David say it? And maybe that's a better way for me to explain it to him because you did a really good job of explaining these concepts. So,
well, that's kind of you, Alan, but I have to say, when you write properly, it reads naturally. It doesn't mean that the first time you try to write it, it comes out properly at all. I probably spent about 4.5 hours per page editing and trying to find the right phrasing for these things. That's the nice thing about writing is you're not delivering it in real time, so you have lots of time to think about what is the best possible way to express this simply to as many people as possible.
Yes, I really appreciate that. So I want to start with a word that I use with my clients. There's probably 2 words that my clients will tell you that they hear from me all the time. The first is to cut their sugar, and then the second is form. And so in your book, you start out with talking about form, and you get into the 6 elements of form. Could you cover those 6 elements with us here today?
If you will run them by me, I don't have a copy of the book in front of me. I can talk to you about form, but what I defined as the 6 elements in the book, I will have to be refreshed on.
Okay, sure. The first one is general position of the legs, arms, and torso.
Oh, okay. Well, I do mention that there's a brief bit in the book called The Body as Architecture. And if you think about any structure, if it's not properly lined up as you build it, it's going to crumble at some point. If one spar in a building is bent slightly, if the joint isn't secure, the building's going to deteriorate faster. And so much more so when you have a living body that gets injured, that repairs itself, and that is constantly moving. So your body is constantly realigning itself. Just for walking alone, the simple act of walking takes something like 300 or 400 different cognitive neurons to fire in the brain, or cognitive signals to fire in the brain, just for simple walking. So lining your body up properly, your joint only has to be out of place by a little bit for a long time to wipe out that joint and cause you problems for the rest of your life. Structure and form are essential to making your body last a lifetime, or to make you do what you want it to.
Okay. And then you get into the second one is the finer alignment of the torso, limbs, hands, feet, neck, and head. And I think that kind of follows along that same line of discussion about making sure that you're in good alignment as you do the movement.
Absolutely. Or even if you're just standing still. A lot of folks get compression in the spine. They get compressed discs, or even I've run into a couple of people lately with compression fractures in the vertebrae themselves. And it's purely from letting their bodies compress onto the spine. They're only lifting from their legs and their feet and their hips And the torso is just sitting there like a lump, and they're not breathing deeply. They're not stretching the spine, which will actually stretch. If you breathe deeply, you can keep your spine far more healthy and not lose any height as you get older, as so many people tend to do.
Okay. Now, the next one is how the muscles are used.
The muscles have to support the joints properly. Now, if you're sitting, then of course you don't need to do as much. But when you're standing, when you're moving, if you're, well, for instance, plantar fasciitis, if you're not using your joints properly, if you're not using your muscles to properly support, motivate, move, and recoil and take the stress off the joints while you move, you're going to endanger everything you've got or the weakest link of whatever part of the movement you're making. Plantar fasciitis comes from runners from impacting the ground too hard. They're not properly using their muscles and their hips and knees as shock absorbers, for instance.
Okay. And the next one is how breathing is involved.
So many people, when they're exercising, and I see this in power yoga and slow motion type work and in rapid motion work, people tend to hold their breath and freeze up when things get tough. When they're challenging themselves with something new, tension grips the body, the breathing stops, the hands grip, the face freezes or contorts. And this prevents the fluidity of the motion from completing itself. When you are moving, you don't want to feel stiff. You don't want to feel stilted. But if your body is gripping, if you're nervous, if you're freezing up, it's not going to help you along the way. It's going to hurt you. And the breathing is a very fundamental aspect of calming the body down. If you can start putting your breathing in rhythm, you can start getting a grip on the tension that's running through your body. If you can get a grip on that, you can learn to let it go. And pretty soon, whatever, even when you're doing a heavy workout with upper body, you'll find that in most parts of every exercise, your breathing is helping you, and you're not freezing up, locking up, gripping, and possibly driving your blood pressure up from straining.
Okay. And that somewhat leads us into the fifth one, which is that release of tension, your ability or degree of your ability to release that tension.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, all of these go hand in glove. If your structure isn't right in the lower part of the body, the upper part of the body can't possibly be right. If it's not right, you're not going to feel right. If you don't feel right, you're going to be tense. You're not going to be able to breathe properly. Everything has to work confluently. But yes, releasing tension, breathing and deep breathing exercises are phenomenal for calming one down if you can just focus on the breathing and not get stuck with all those other thoughts running through your head. And in exercise, that works as well. Focus on your exercise and focus on the elements that make that exercise work the best. Don't worry about the call you got to make when you get back to work.
Yes, and that kind of leads to the last one, which is kind of your ability to kind of move in a fluid and controlled manner.
That is ultimately, I guess, the goal, at least in my background is in dance and martial arts, primarily of stage fighting and that sort of thing. If you can't move fluidly, you're not going to complete what you're trying to do. And it calls for lots of deep thinking about the exercises. It calls for lots of deep thinking about your form, about what's not feeling right, about what does, noticing when things work, noticing when they don't. And if you practice enough, like with anything, you will get your best out of it. And you will be relaxed, you will be fluid, you will find that your body moves in ways you never thought possible and more freely than it ever did before, with better alignment, better support, and better overall health.
Yes, I agree. And I don't know how many times I'll go into a gym and see someone who's, in just a really bad position, pretty much doing everything to hurt themselves, jerking, not breathing well, not managing their core, just all the way around. And I'm like, okay, that's an injury waiting to happen. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of people just don't take the time to really pay attention to form. And we're going to get into injuries in a minute. But before we get there, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I think I find most people are most comfortable with when they first walk into a gym, and that's the treadmills. And so most people that I've seen, the first time they walk in the gym, that's where they want to go. And some of them will spend their entire career, so to speak, working out on the treadmill. Could you go through the pros and cons of a treadmill?
Well, the great thing about a treadmill, as far as it's actually a point I don't make in the book, but it does occur to me as you say it, is that you walk into a gym, it's nothing intimidating about a treadmill. It's not going to talk back to you. It's not going to look down on you. It's not going to make fun of the shape you're in. And it is going to help you work. So it's a very user-friendly item in that aspect. Treadmills they're less intimidating than going outside. If you're in the room with a treadmill, there are lots of other people on the treadmills or not, but that's where the treadmill people go. It's not like you're running down the street past pedestrians, over hills, cross streets, blocking traffic, and having people judge you as you go by. And a lot of folks who are in a gym for the first time are shy of being judged, which I understand. But for the general public, lots of folks love treadmills and they stay on them, as you say, for their careers. They're great because they're safer, they're easy to get used to, and they help you do your work. You have the soft matte bottom, which is not as hard as the street. It's not even as hard as walking on the grass, unless the grass is pretty thick. The motion helps you move your body. You have the rails to hang on to if you're concerned. You have an area in front of you with all of the little readouts, which some people are fascinated by. Although I do have to say, I don't think that some of those things are as accurate as they might be, like the heart rate and that sort of thing. And you have a stand there for your magazine. There's usually a TV, so you can watch TV, so you won't get bored, and you can do your walking. And with luck, whether you're walking or running, at the very worst, regardless of form, structure, what you're trying to achieve, and don't, if you're getting your heart rate up, at least you're doing some good. Then, now, having said that, if you're not paying attention to your form, you're not going to help yourself in the long run. But the treadmill is a very safe place to be. It's a very easy place to be, and there are plenty of distractions. You can watch the other people in the gym. There are lots of distractions, so you won't get bored while you're walking or running.
Awesome. I do think getting outside and some of the dynamics of that environment, just the environmental cues of being out of doors, I think is extremely valuable. But I do see the opportunity for using the treadmill as a tool in the right circumstances. And then again, if it is something you just end up doing, then just make sure that you're getting that variety in your workout. So you're getting all of the different modalities that you can from that piece of equipment.
I agree with you. But also out here in LA, a lot of folks use a treadmill because it's more comfortable. It's in an air-conditioned room, which I am not concerned one way about air conditioning or another. As long as your heart's in good shape, you can handle temperatures up over 105, 106 with your workout. But that is very much with a caveat, as long as your cardiovascular system's in good shape. I don't want anybody running out there and sweating it out and hurting themselves because they heard me say that. But yes, I agree with you completely. Outdoors, I think, is far more natural. That is where you encounter the things that your feet are going to encounter every day. Curbs and street corners and cement and grass and stairs. And if you're lucky, horse trails and some hills and that sort of thing. But the treadmill is fine if that's where you want to stay, especially if you have injuries you're working through or old repetitive stress problems you're working through. The treadmill can be a very effective tool. But as you say, you have to pay attention to the different ways the treadmill can be used and pay attention to your form. And the big problem on treadmills are the handrails and the magazine stand, or the numbers and the readouts. People hunch over. Holding onto a rail, people tend to lift their shoulders and round their bodies forward, let their bellies hang out, and plod along. That just isn't going to be helpful for your body in the long run. You're setting up so many unnecessary problems. Leave your hands off the handrail. Learn to walk tall, to press your lower belly in, lift up through the torso, lift up through the top of the head. Use your whole body. Get everything involved in the exercise, even if it's in a passive situation, as with your hands. Make sure they're not gripped, or if you wish, do gripping exercises while you work. But don't hang onto the handrail and slouch over and get stuck on watching the TV or reading a book and forgetting that you're plodding along. Plodding along is not going to help you.
Yes, I agree. Okay, so you get into stretching, which I think is probably one of your favorite topics from reading the book. I really enjoyed the depth that you got into with that. You talked about 5 considerations when someone is stretching, and I know that you don't have that with you, but I'll go over them, but I wanted you to take a little bit of time to talk about each. And the first is, how often should you stretch?
Flexibility is a very personal thing, and the more I work with people, the more I see that. My background, if I didn't have flexibility, I would not be walking today. I have a hairline fracture that's a congenital birth defect in my lower spine, so flexibility became something that I had to use to learn to walk without having the spinal surgery, which I was trying to avoid and have managed to avoid. But the main thing that people need about flexibility, and this will have something to do with their genetic makeup, is keeping their joints healthy, basically, and keeping their muscles in an even balance. You don't want one part of one of your calf muscles to be really tight while the other part is soft and smooth. You want them all to be working together. And flexibility helps that, and that sort of thing, when one muscle group is out of tune with the others, is the kind of thing that will put stress across a joint unnaturally and cause stress in the joint. So the amount of flexibility that one needs, or how often, I would say 4 times a week. 3 is minimum. And all of my training If you want to learn something, especially something new, you have to try at least 3 times a week, especially physically, or you're not going to encourage your body to take a foothold, because 4 times a week you won't be doing anything at all, and it's going to go with the majority. So at least 3 times a week of a decent stretch if you want to make any progress and you want to be safe. But flexibility is a very personal thing. You only need the amount of flexibility you need to keep yourself healthy, and that really varies by individual.
Okay. The second one is, how far should you stretch?
Now that is something else. If you like the amount of flexibility you have, then when you stretch, you have to challenge it. If it's comfortable where you're stretching, go to a little closer to the boundary of the edge of your stretch. You have to go a little bit beyond where you want your body to stay if you want your body to stay there. If you just go to where it's, oh, that's a comfortable stretch, and that's all that you ever do, it will diminish over time. You have to push it. You have to challenge the boundaries if you want the boundaries to remain.
Okay. How should a good stretch feel?
Well, there's going to be, of course, the stress of the stretch, which can be pain or is painful, actually, quite seriously sometimes if you're really going for a heavy stretch, but the pain should be comprehensive. If you were stretching the leg, if you're sitting down and you have one or both legs in front of you and you're hanging over the legs, you don't want to feel that stretch in just the middle of the calf, or especially just behind the knee, or just in the middle of one of the hamstrings at the back of the thigh. If you feel something like that, you have to relax the knee a bit or even bend the knee a little bit. When you have a spot feeling like that, it's an indication of either an injury recovering itself or one waiting to happen. So what you would like to feel in something like that, you'd like to feel comprehensively. If your foot is flexed, you would feel hopefully the stretch from the bottom of the foot all the way up through the back of the calf, back of the knee, up through the thigh, and up into the hip, and possibly into the lower back, possibly on up the back and into the back of the neck, depending on what part of your body is the tightest. But some long continuous stretch, either in the upper or lower or combined body, should be felt. And any good stretch, you should feel, as I say, a comprehensive working of the part that's being stretched. And that means get your feet involved if you're using your legs. Keep your shoulders down if you're using your upper body. I don't want to start giving out advice.
Okay. Well, the next one is somewhat of advice. Is should stretches be held statically, pulsed, or constantly extend?
Well, static only works if you are about to go to bed and you're doing passive stretching. Static stretching is really not very helpful, especially before a warm-up. Actually, there was a new study that came out that showed, and it's something I'd always felt, and I think dancers do instinctively, but I'm not sure martial artists do. Static and passive stretching before you exercise loosens your muscles up so that they will not respond sharply on quick movements for about the first 20 minutes of your workout. They get overstretched, but they're not being worked at their point of stretch, so they become a little flaccidly loose, like an overstretched rubber band for the first 20 minutes before they tighten back up. So static and passive stretching are fine before you go to sleep, or if you're injured, it's fine for an injury, but not before your workout. Pulsing is something that they do in dance classes, especially in some of the ethnic and jazz classes, and it's great for movement, it's great for control, it's great for learning, but it is very dangerous on your body. Anyone who's fallen asleep sitting and their head on their chest and their head suddenly jerks back up knows that the muscles will respond to an overstretched pulse, sometimes very negatively. If that jerk happens in the middle of your extension, you have just pulled the muscle and you've got a burn in that muscle that's going to last you several weeks. So continuous stretch, I think, is the safest and healthiest. And when I say continuous, it means when you're in that position, you keep working forward, you keep reaching, you keep all the muscles working that are supporting the stretch. And it's, once again, fluid and it's full, and you go to as far as you're going. And when you relax and come back up, you use your muscles to come back up as well. You don't just use your skeleton. You don't let everything go. The muscles always work. The stretch is fluidly extended and fluidly released. Now, some people like to hold their stretches. This is slightly different. Some people like to hold their stretches at their range of motion for a period of time. Some people enjoy that quite a bit. It hurts me, but I do know people that it has helped. So that is somewhat by individual.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the points. There's one more in here, is which muscles should be stretched first. But kind of before we get to that point, I think what I've gathered from this, and it's really kind of my approach to the way I stretch, is I know the purpose for why I'm doing a particular stretch. I'm not just doing a routine for the sake of a routine. It's like, I know that my calves can get really tight, and that's going to inhibit my ability to go deep in a squat. So I will spend a lot of time working on my calves the day of a squat. I know I'm going to be doing some squatting. I'll really work hard on my calves for the day or two leading up to that to make sure that my calves now are not inhibiting that full range of motion. And then, yes, when I get ready to squat, I'll actually get down into the bottom of a squat, at my full range of motion, and I will just sit there to really let that set in so that my musculature is warmed up through the full range of motion, and I'm ready to do the lift. And, the one I'm doing when I'm doing the full squat is a little bit more of a pulsed, but that's only, again, like you said, because I don't want to limit the strength of those muscles that are going to be doing the squat. I can inhibit my calves all I want because they aren't the muscles that are going to be working during a squat. They're just a stability muscle at that point. So I just need them to be able to allow my foot to do the dorsiflexion possible that, I can now do the full squat. So, I really think it is, as can we kind of go through this, is all of these you're doing the stretch for a particular purpose, and knowing that purpose and then kind of doing the stretch that gives you the best benefit is really kind of how that all wraps together.
I think you're absolutely right. And actually, you made a good point, because pulsing, when you're doing your squats, you have some weight, right? You have some weight on your upper body.
Yeah, typically somewhere, depending. Yeah.
When I think of pulsing, in dance class, I studied some African dance with Charles Moore, and there's a lot of popping the rib cage forward and back. There's a lot of reaching forward with the arms as the back is as you're popping the rib cage forward and pulling the shoulders back, that sort of thing. And in some extreme angles of stretch, I've had dance teachers who have you pulse while you're down there. Maybe your legs are wide, you're down with your hands on the floor over one knee, and they'll have you bounce over that knee at that extreme degree of stretch. That's more the kind of pulsing that I'm warning people against when you're doing weight training or exercises. And basically a pulse at that point is shortening the range of motion between beginning and end of the range, right? You're just instead of going full range, you're doing a quarter range or a fifth of the range for one particular part of the motion. That is, once again, as long as you don't work too quickly, and you do keep control throughout the musculature, throughout the range of motion you're using, that's perfectly fine. It does require more finesse than just doing full range of motion stuff, but that kind of pulsing can actually, as you say, be very beneficial to the muscles involved. But when you're stretching at range of motion, or in a place where you have a lot of stress on one particular joint or set of joints, you don't want to be pulsing unless you really know what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. And then, so your final point here is which muscles you would want to stretch first.
That comes to what you ties in with what you said about having a purpose to the stretch. Even with people who aren't looking to do anything other than keep their bodies in decent fitness through their lives, and they do their 3 workouts a week, and they do them at a moderate to strong intensity and get their heart rates up, your physiology is going to have something that needs stretching more than the other. For a lot of people, the lower back is the first place to go. For some folks, it's the shoulders. But generally, you start with the larger muscle groups, and then you work your way through to the smaller. If you start with smaller muscle groups without the warmth and the blood flow that's coming from having warmed up the larger muscle groups, some of those finer tuned little muscle fibers might, get really upset about being pulled around before they had a chance to put on a jacket and have a cup of tea. So I would say larger groups first, and the purpose to them is what your body needs, what works best, as you said, for you, finding the stretch that works best for the purpose that you have in mind. And for a lot of folks, it's general fitness, but if it's something more specific, then you have to pay that much more attention.
Yes, absolutely. So next, again, when someone first starts really kind of getting into exercise, they experience pain, and that pain can be a good pain because they've done some work on the muscle, and the muscle is reacting to this new stimulus. And so that's a kind of what we call a good pain. It can get bad, like DOMS and whatnot. But every once in a while they get concerned, and it's a good concern to have, is that you could be injured. And you get into the book, you get into the recipes for disaster. And I like that phrase, because, when you're older and you get injured, it really is a disaster, because this could literally keep you from ever really being able to gain the level of fitness you want. if you're not able to recover from this injury. So you get into 6 basic causes for injuries. I'd like to go through those a little bit, if you could give us a little bit. So the first one you talk about is impact.
Well, impact injuries are fairly obvious. You fall while you're ice skating, you drop back. Your body, if it's not trained, your elbow will lock out because your body would rather break its arm than break your back. So you will jam down and the impact will break your wrist or your elbow. If you're studying martial arts and everyone has seen in an action adventure movie or some film, a guy punches another guy suddenly and then, oh, my hand, and he's shaking his hand, and it's either his wrist or his fingers. That's because his impact was stronger than the poor alignment of his fist when it hit the guy, either by the fist being too loose or the wrist not being lined up. But impact is a hard smack on some part of your body that you do not like and your body does not like, and it causes you pain and injury. And it can be, I'm working with a guy now, very curiously, an off-road unicyclist. He does mountain dirt trails on a unicycle with a 4-foot-high tire. But he took a big spill onto his left hip. And his body is fine. He's recovered well. He's stretching out. His musculature is good. But he's bruised the hip bone. He's bruised his femur, the bone in the thigh. And there are no visible signs of bruising a bone. It just hurts for about 6 months. And it slowly diminishes, but he's finding out what happens when you bruise a bone right now, which he hadn't done before. But it's easier to bruise soft tissue. It's easier to injure joints. And its impact is a very easy thing to hurt yourself with. You can do it by running too hard on pavement. You can do it by jumping and not supporting through your heels when you come down, or you can do it sparring. You can anything, walking into a door.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that when I see, because I've done some CrossFit and I'll see the folks do the box jumps where they jump up and they jump back down, and I just, I've always told them, I'm like, no, I'm stepping down off of this because, those tendons and ligaments, they're not meant to stop a 200+ pound body from coming off of a 24-inch box. They'll do fine to jump up there because then, I'm impacting on a box after I've gone up. But to go down, I'm stepping down. So I think, again, it's just a kind of understanding that, there is an opportunity for impact to injure you, and just being aware of the impact you're putting on your body so that you're either, that you're physically prepared to handle that impact, or if you're not, to avoid the impact.
No, I agree with you completely. And a lot of folks don't realize running downhill, for instance, puts up to 7 times of your body weight into your knees. And most people don't realize that. A lot of folks get hurt running downhill. And you're absolutely right. If you're in a situation that you're not completely aware of and there may be impact issues, lighten up, back off, take 20% off of what you think you can do and approach it safely. And find out what you got to give before you decide to challenge yourself at its max.
Yeah, it's funny. I ran the Big Sur Marathon, and one of the beautiful things about that run is the run into Carmel at the end. But you're going up and down hills. So these little, just rolling little hills. And it was kind of hilarious as I was going down the hills, I'd slowed myself down so much. Everybody was passing me. I had all these people passing me, and then we'd get to the hill to go back up the next hill, and then I would pass all of them. And so we were doing it completely backwards. But again, for me, it was protective because I understood what that impact was going to do to my legs and my knees and my ankles, and my back. So I just really didn't want to injure myself with that run. I wanted to enjoy it. And, it was just interesting that so many people were just flying down the hill because it felt easy to run downhill. But
easy. Yeah. Well, exactly. You have momentum. You don't have to work hard.
Yeah.
and you'll see that in gyms. You'll see it in every weight room. You'll see it in every rapid movement exercise class. You'll see people using the momentum of their bodies to spare their muscles the work they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, the next one is repetitive stress.
Repetitive stress, a very good example of repetitive stress. I've run in this last year and a half with so many, I'd say a dozen or 15 people at least, who have problems in their knee. And they have climbing stairs. You'll have that one position where the knee doesn't want to work. It wants to give out, so you have to hold on to the rail. Some people have it so badly that in any number of positions their knees want to give out. But the problem comes from the hip, and it comes from sitting with your legs flopped open in front of a computer. And you do that for hours and hours, your hip actually gets injured and it screws up all of the balances of muscles in your legs, and you end up with pain in the knee, and you never know it's coming from your hip until somebody tells you. But repetitive stress, it could be something as simple as washing dishes night after night and always using the left hand to hold the plate, the right hand to scrub, and leaning in that certain position. Any number of people have shoulder problems, elbow problems, wrist problems, knee, ankle, you name it, from doing the same motion over and over, either too many times over the years or with a slightly bad form repeatedly for a year or two. And this is something that when you're younger folks don't always get, because in my 20s, my form wasn't nearly as good as it was now, even though I was dancing professional, all of that. But you can handle the repetitive stress a lot more. But here, where that was at 20,000 reps, here I am at 75,000 reps. That's a lot more repetitions. And if I'm doing something wrong or overdoing it, the stress will out and I will be hurt. And repetitive stress pain can last for a long time. If you've had it for years, it's rare that you can make it go away rapidly, but it can be made to go away and it can be fixed.
Yes, yes. Okay, the next one is over-challenging your range of motion.
This goes back to when we were talking about stretching. And a slow stretch, like I say, if you feel one spot only is pulling more than everything else and it feels tight or it doesn't feel quite right or it feels like you're hitting a concrete wall, you've got to back off of it. If it's a rapid movement in which you're extending in a stretch, a lot of flying kicks in martial arts, well, any number of movements in martial arts, you are at an extreme range of motion throwing force. And it is very easy when you are throwing force or going to an extended range of motion with energy to get that your body will get outside of what it can control and you will hurt yourself in that moment.
Yeah, I see this a lot when people are running, is that they're they're actually overextending their kick, their step out. And, as a result, they're adding strain to their lower back from the running. And again, if they do that over and over, they risk injury.
Oh, yeah. And another thing, speaking of runners, a lot of folks, well, especially women, and I don't mean this offensively, it's just a posture they take, they round over from the lower back, drop their shoulders forward, and work from the top of the thighs and the top of the glutes in the lower back, rather than lifting up and using the belly and the thighs and the inner thighs and the hips, which causes, and they're trying to get rid of their backside, but because of their posture, they're only increasing it and actually increasing the risk of injury to the lower back or the knees or the thighs.
Okay. Now, the next one you get into is a similar topic. It's hyperextension.
Okay. A hyperextension is generally only for the genetically inclined. It can happen to you. Let's say I was using focus mitts and I had a big guy punching into them and he was getting really exuberant. My right arm got extended all the way out to my side and slightly behind my shoulder, and he wailed on it as hard as he could, and it threw my arm farther back than it's supposed to go and tore my shoulder up. That's hyperextension. That's the kind that happens to normal folks who don't have joints that automatically hyperextend. But we've all seen people who can reach out and extend their arm and their elbow will bend the wrong way. It'll go backwards a bit. For some people, a whole lot. For some people, only an inch or two. And the same thing with the knees. And that's a genetic looseness in those joints and their connectors. And if you have that, it's perfectly fine. But try to train your body to where your body lines up properly. So when you stretch your elbow, it will actually stop in an appropriate alignment rather than bending back against the way the joint's supposed to be, which will ultimately really damage the joint. So if you exercise hyperextension, just be careful to not take impact or take too much force or put too much force in a position you can't properly support, lest you be pulled apart like a chicken bone. Or if you have hyperextension as a genetic thing, really work on getting your alignment proper and not letting the hyperextension have its day.
Yeah, when I was younger playing football, it was fairly common for me to end up hyperextending my knees because I was an offensive lineman, and so I'm lined up against someone who's quite heavy, obviously putting a great deal of resistance on me. And if I didn't get my feet right, didn't keep my feet moving and keep my alignment proper, there was a huge opportunity for my knee to effectively lock out. And when it did lock out, now that resistance literally there's no muscle at this point to stop it from just continuing to push. And it could get quite painful when you go through that. If you do it the wrong way, you really can't injure yourself like you did with your shoulder. So now the next one's resistance overload.
Well, once again, this goes to when you're stretching, you cannot put yourself in a position or in where you are putting too much stress on any joint being stretched. Now, if you're stretching your back, I can if you're tight or if I'm tight, my range of motion is everything it should be that day, I can think I'm going for the gold and I'm going to push through this and get to my regular range of motion. I'll probably strain something along the way doing that because I am putting too much force into the joint that I'm trying to stretch. You have to get to know your body and get to know what it has available so that you do not, for instance, if you're on a bench doing flies and your weight's fairly heavy, you take your elbows wide while you're on your back reclining. If you open your arms too far with your shoulders too wide apart, you'll find a place where you are going to strain yourself trying to pull back up. So that's, even though that's a muscular exercise, because it's a fly, you're also working range of motion and you're going into a breadth of stretch that can be easily overdone with the weight overloaded with the weight in your hands.
Yeah, I know one common one that I've seen is when people who really want to start building up their pull-ups will use the negative of the pull-up. That they're not strong enough to lift their own body weight, so they'll effectively get themselves up and then try to slowly lower themselves. And this can be a very effective technique, but if your musculature's not quite ready for it, you're really putting a lot of strain on that muscle because the negative of it, your muscles are able to carry a lot more weight. But again, if you're heavier than what your body should be able to pull up, doing that negative can actually damage the muscle and put you in a lot of pain.
You're absolutely right. And also, it's a good at this point to point out that the body is much better built in a pull-up. It's much better designed to pull you up than it is to slowly let you down. We can draw those muscles from that angle a lot better than we can resist being pulled out. In pull-ups, especially, people do not use their whole grip, which runs risk of the wrist and the elbow, and they tend to let their shoulders rise, which runs a risk up and down the spine, and especially the neck. The traps will get too tight, and you can just really, form, especially on everything, but on things like pull-ups and doing negatives, as you say, can be very dangerous. You have to be very careful with that sort of thing.
Okay, and then the final one you have here is changing speed and dynamics.
For me, this goes primarily to my warm-ups because I start out with a dynamic warm-up where I spend about 5 minutes getting my blood flowing and getting some looseness into every part of my body. And I mean, I work my fingers, my hands, my toes, my feet, but I use that work everything in between as well. And I start basically with larger muscle groups. So I can move through my stretches very rapidly. But if you get going too fast, and this goes back to when you were talking about pulsing, because some people, there's a difference between pulsing in a controlled manner and jerking. And jerking will wipe you out, whereas if you really have your pulsing under control, it can be okay. But you'll see a lot of people doing reps where they're not working through the entire movement. They're going down slowly and jerking up quickly or something like that, or that sort of thing. And changing dynamics and rhythms I personally believe it can cause more lactic acid buildup in the muscles. We used to run people in boot camp, outdoor boot camp, fitness level, not military, but we run them sometimes a 5K in the course of the run. And some of the other guys would sometimes come back in and then have them do sprints. Now you've been running at a medium pace for 20, 25 minutes and your body is beat. It is running out of water. And then all of a sudden you've got to challenge these muscles with quick start, quick stop, takeoff sprints. And every single boot camp, there would be one guy, if they did that regularly, whose hamstring would just freeze up in the middle of it and he'd be out for 3 weeks. Changing dynamics, you have to be very, very careful that you are ready for the change. And I would say if you're going to do really rapid, hard stuff, you might want to do that earlier on in your workout and save the long marathon type work for later on when you're not going to be required to do rapid changes of direction, speed, impact, etc. on tired muscles.
All right. So the book is called Body School, and I agree with you. It is the ultimate guide to the human body. It is an excellent book for anyone that wants to know more about their body and how to move their body. So, David, I really appreciate you coming on today. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, where would you like for me to send them?
Well, I have a Facebook site. I'm just under David Knox. There's 3 or 4 of us out there, but if you find the right one, my cover Body School is up there. I also have one video up on YouTube under the title Body School. And on the Facebook site, there are a few videos showing how to deal with carpal tunnel repair and carpal tunnel prevention And there will be others coming up soon. I just don't have a cameraman at the moment. My cameraman just moved out of town. But there's good information there. And of course, anyone can email me at David Knox, Knox, BS as in body school or Boy Scout, or if you're angry with me, you might find another use for BS. But davidknoxbs@gmail.com. And I'll be happy to talk to anyone and help them out in any way. If I could, one little caveat. Body school, or rather, I wrote the book as much for professional people in professional arts as I did for lay people, although, of course, it works great for everyone. But I have had a couple of dancers who've seen it who said it would have helped them immensely had they had it at their beginning. So I just wanted to get that out because the book isn't really being marketed towards that end of things. But I think there's a lot of professionals out there trying to learn how to get their bodies set up right, that it could help.
Yeah. And again, from my perspective, I just saw it as a great opportunity. You did a really good job of kind of wording things and explaining them that, if I'm working with a client and they're not hearing me the way I need them to hear me, I'm going to be pulling this book out and say, okay, how did David say it? Because, it was really good and clear the way you did it. So again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. I had some great instructors, Alan, and I have just learned from them, but I greatly appreciate your kindness in enjoying my book. I hope it helps you and a lot of other folks. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you, David. As I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we are going to make October Gratitude Month on the Facebook group. Gratitude is a very powerful tool. Please join us at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, I'll go over my 11 best fitness tips. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.